I was standing in a quiet hospital hallway in Boston when my son Caleb looked at me with tired eyes and said the words I never expected to hear. Mom, Sabrina only wants her family here today. Please do not make this harder. His voice was not angry. It was worse. It was distant, cold, as if I were a visitor who had shown up without permission. My name is Linda Morrison. I'm 62 years old, and I have spent most of my life believing that love and sacrifice would be enough to hold a family together. I raised Caleb on my own after my husband Alan passed away. I worked long hours in Cleveland, cleaned offices before sunrise, and sat at a reception desk in the afternoons just to keep the lights on. Through every storm, Caleb was the one thing that kept me moving, and I thought I would always have a place in his life. But on that day in the hospital, I realized something painful. Somewhere along the way, I had gone from being his home to being an obligation he did not know how to carry. That moment did not break me. It opened my eyes. And this story is about everything that happened before and after the day my son told me to stay away. Before everything fell apart, I used to think of myself as a simple woman. I lived in a small two-bedroom house on the west side of Cleveland, a place where the winter wind felt like it could cut through bone, and the neighbors all nodded politely without ever getting too close. Life was not glamorous, but it was steady, and for many years that was enough. When my husband Alan died from a sudden heart attack, I was only 34. One moment he was laughing in the kitchen, stirring sugar into his coffee, and the next moment he was gone. I remember standing in the living room after the funeral, looking at the empty couch, trying to understand how the world could continue spinning when mine had stopped. Caleb was just 8 years old. He kept asking if his dad would ever come home. I did not know how to answer without breaking. We learned to survive together. I took the first job I could find cleaning offices downtown before sunrise. The smell of bleach and cold tile floors became familiar. I would rush home afterward, get Caleb ready for school, then sit behind a reception desk at a medical clinic, answering phones with a smile that felt heavier every day. We did not have much, but we had routine, and we had each other. Caleb grew into a thoughtful, quiet boy who always tried to help. He would fold laundry without being asked and leave sticky notes on the fridge that said things like, "Mom, you are doing great," or "Mom, we will be okay." Those little notes were my anchor. They reminded me that love was still present even in the hardest seasons. I never remarried. People told me I was still young, that I should try to find companionship again, but I only shook my head. My heart was already full with the responsibility of raising my child. Everything I did, every hour I worked, every dream I set aside was for Caleb. I believed with all my heart that when he grew up, he would still see me the way he once did, his safe place, his constant, his home. I just did not know how much life would change once he started building a world of his own. Caleb left Cleveland for the first time when he was 18. He had been accepted into a well-respected university in Boston, a place filled with old brick buildings, ivy-covered walls, and a confidence that young people seemed to breathe in like oxygen. I remember standing with him at the bus station, holding a paper cup of coffee that had gone cold in my hands. He hugged me quickly and said, "Mom, I will call you every night." I believed him because up to that point, he had never broken a promise. The first year was easier than I expected. Every night at exactly 9 o'clock, my phone would ring. Caleb would tell me about his professors, his new friends, the tiny dorm room he was trying to decorate with thrift store posters. I would sit on the couch, smiling into the receiver, imagining him walking across campus with that familiar, determined stride. Even on the tough days, I felt close to him. But as time passed, the calls changed. They were still warm, but shorter, more rushed. "Mom, I have a study group." "Mom, I'm heading to the lab." "Mom, I'm really tired today." I understood. College was demanding. Young people grow fast and grow outward. Still, I missed him. After graduation, he accepted a job offer in Boston. I encouraged him to take it, even though a part of me wished he would come home. He found an apartment, a small place with peeling paint, but he spoke about it like it was a palace. Our calls shifted again. Instead of 9 o'clock, they happened whenever he remembered, usually once or twice a week. I started hearing new phrases. Mom, my team is amazing. Mom, you would love the people here. Mom, I think I'm starting to feel settled. He was building a life, one that didn't include me in the day-to-day. And while I told myself this was natural, that parents were meant to step back, I couldn't help noticing the gap widening. The silence between our conversations seemed to grow longer, heavier. Even then, I convinced myself it was only a phase. I did not know that the next chapter would pull him even farther away from me than I ever imagined. Caleb met her during his second year working in Boston. Her name was Sabrina Hayes, and from the first moment he mentioned her, I sensed a shift in his voice. There was a brightness, almost like a spark he couldn't hide. He told me she was an architect, confident, stylish, someone who knew exactly where she was going in life. I smiled and listened because that's what mothers do, even when our hearts tighten a bit without reason. The first time I spoke to Sabrina was over a video call. She waved politely, but her smile felt practiced, the kind someone uses in a professional meeting rather than in a conversation with the mother of the man she is dating. She had a beautiful apartment in the heart of Boston, filled with tall plants and modern furniture that looked untouched. Every detail was perfectly arranged. Even her tone was polished, precise. "Nice to meet you, Linda," she said, as if reading from a script. I tried to ignore the unease. Caleb was happy, and that mattered more than anything. So I asked questions about her work, her family, her hobbies. Her answers were courteous but clipped. When I spoke, she nodded, but her eyes drifted away, as though she was waiting for the conversation to end. It was clear she did not know how to fit me into her world. After that call, Caleb began mentioning her more often. "Mom, Sabrina and I tried this new restaurant. Mom, Sabrina thinks I should apply for a promotion. Mom, Sabrina says I work too much." Her name sprinkled into every part of his life like seasoning. I wanted to be supportive, so I listened. But each time he said her name, I felt the distance between us widen a little more. Months passed, and their relationship grew serious. He brought her home for Thanksgiving. Sabrina arrived with a designer coat, a bouquet of lilies, and an expression that made my living room look too small. She complimented the meal, but ate very little. She said the house was cozy, but pronounced the word in a way that suggested it was outdated. Caleb did not notice. He was distracted, glowing, proud to have her on his arm. I told myself to stay hopeful. New relationships often come with awkward edges. But deep inside, I knew Sabrina was not just another chapter in Caleb's life. She was becoming the center of it. And without warning, I was being moved farther and farther toward the margins. When Caleb told me he was getting married, I felt a warmth bloom in my chest. He called on a Tuesday evening, sounding excited, breathless. "Mom, I asked Sabrina to marry me. She said yes." I closed my eyes and tried to picture the young boy who used to slip handwritten notes onto the refrigerator. That boy was gone, replaced by a man building a life miles away from mine. Still, I whispered, "Congratulations, honey." I meant it, or at least I wanted to. A week later, he emailed me the wedding details. Not called, emailed. The ceremony would be held at a historic estate outside Boston, a place with marble floors and chandeliers that cost more than my yearly salary. The message ended with a short line that stung more than he realized. "Mom, we arranged the seating to make things simple. Don't worry about anything." When I arrived at the venue, I understood what that line meant. The ushers directed guests to their rows with wide smiles, but when they looked at my invitation, their expressions changed. They placed me in the third row, not with family, but with distant acquaintances and coworkers of the couple. I sat quietly smoothing the fabric of my dress, while the rest of the guests whispered about the decorations, the flowers, the impressive Hayes family connections. Sabrina greeted her parents with a long, warm embrace. Her mother fussed over her veil. Her father straightened her bouquet. When Caleb appeared, he kissed his future in-laws and posed for photos. For a moment, I wondered if anyone would notice I was there at all. During the ceremony, I watched my son say "I do" with a joy I had not seen since he was a child. And though I wanted to hold on to that happiness, I couldn't ignore the ache in my chest. I was witnessing my son's new beginning from a distance, both physically and emotionally. After the reception, people toasted to love and new journeys. I clapped politely but stayed quiet. When Caleb finally approached me hours later, he hugged me only briefly before whispering, "Mom, please don't make today complicated." It was the first time I realized my presence felt like an inconvenience in the world he was choosing to build, and that realization followed me long after the music faded. After the wedding, something subtle but unmistakable began to shift. It started with the calls. Caleb used to call me every few days, even during his busiest college years, but now weeks would pass before I heard his voice. When I did, the conversations felt thinner, like paper that could tear with the slightest pull. "Mom, things are hectic. Mom, I'll call you later. Mom, I have plans tonight." The warmth that used to live in his voice had cooled. Sabrina rarely spoke to me directly. She never picked up if I called, and she replied to messages with short, polite lines that felt like they belonged in a business email. "Thanks, Linda. We are well. Take care." There was no curiosity. No connection, just distance wrapped in perfect manners. I tried not to take it personally, but some things sting no matter how many times you tell yourself to toughen up. Birthdays came and went. For my 61st birthday, Caleb sent flowers through a delivery service with a typed card that read, "Happy birthday, Mom, thinking of you." It was kind, but the message felt hollow compared to the years he used to show up at my door with a homemade cake and a shy smile. I found myself checking my phone more often than I would admit, waiting for a text, waiting for a call, waiting for something that reminded me I still mattered in his life. My friend Marjorie noticed I was quieter than usual during our weekly walks around the neighborhood. "You cannot pour from an empty cup, Linda," she said gently. "You need to set boundaries." But how do you set boundaries with your only child without feeling like you are giving up on him? So I kept trying. I mailed small packages, a knitted scarf, a jar of homemade jam, a framed photo of Caleb as a boy holding a fishing rod with his father. Sometimes I got a thank you, sometimes I got nothing at all. The gap between us did not widen all at once. It stretched slowly, like an old rope pulled tighter and tighter. And by the time I realized how fragile it had become, it was already on the verge of snapping. When Sabrina became pregnant, I thought maybe things would change. A baby often brings families closer. At least that was what I hoped. Caleb called one evening, sounding both nervous and proud. "Mom, we are expecting." I felt tears rise before I could stop them. I pictured tiny socks and bedtime stories and the chance to hold a new life that carried pieces of all of us. "Congratulations, honey," I said. I meant every word. But from the beginning, I was kept at a distance. Sabrina never reached out, not once. I learned about the early ultrasound from a photo sent without context, a small grainy picture on my phone with the caption, "Look, Mom." That was it. No call, no shared excitement, just a forwarded image that felt like a wall. As the months went on, the pattern continued. They attended birthing classes. I only saw the photos on social media. They bought baby furniture. I heard about it secondhand. Even the gender reveal, a moment families usually share with joy, was something I discovered by scrolling through Facebook late at night. A video showed pink confetti exploding while everyone cheered. Everyone except me. I had not even known the party was happening. When their son Oliver was born, I was not told. I woke up one morning, poured myself coffee, and opened my phone to see a photo of Caleb and Sabrina in the hospital, holding a tiny baby wrapped in a blue blanket. The caption read, "Welcome to the world, Oliver, our perfect boy." I stared at the screen, trying to breathe through the heaviness in my chest. How could my own child not think to call me for a moment so life-changing? What hurt most was the next post, a picture of Sabrina smiling proudly while her mother held Oliver. The caption said, "Could not have done this without my rock, Grandma Hayes." Those 4 words cut deeper than I expected. Grandma Hayes, as if I didn't exist. I spent that entire day sitting at the kitchen table, trying to understand how a grandmother could meet her first grandchild through a screen. I kept thinking it must be a misunderstanding. Maybe Caleb planned to call but got busy. Maybe Sabrina was recovering and things were chaotic. But the truth was clear. They had built a world around their new baby, and I was not part of it. A week after Oliver was born, I finally gathered the courage to ask if I could visit. My message to Caleb was simple. I would love to come meet the baby. Please tell me when it is a good time. Hours passed with no reply, then a day, then two. When he finally responded, his message was short. Mom, things are hectic. Maybe a quick visit this weekend. Quick, that was the word he chose. I booked a bus ticket from Cleveland to Boston because I wanted to see my grandson, even if it meant traveling 12 hours in cramped seats with restless passengers and flickering overhead lights. The entire ride, I imagined holding him, feeling his warmth, breathing him in for the first time. I pictured Caleb smiling the way he used to. I imagined something soft, something healing. When I arrived outside their apartment building, Caleb came down alone to unlock the door. He looked exhausted, distracted. Mom, thank you for coming, he said, but his tone held more obligation than joy. I followed him upstairs, my heart thudding as we approached the nursery. Sabrina was standing beside the crib. She did not smile, she did not even pretend. She placed her hand protectively on Oliver, as if I were someone who might drop him. "Hello, Linda," she said in that careful voice she always used with me. I asked gently, "May I hold him?" She hesitated. The silence stretched so long I felt my face grow hot. Finally, she shook her head slightly. "He just fell asleep, maybe later." I tried to swallow the disappointment, but it stuck in my throat. So I sat on the edge of the couch while they talked quietly about feeding schedules and pediatric appointments. I felt like furniture, something forgotten, left in the corner. After an hour, Caleb glanced at his phone. "Mom, we need to get ready to take Oliver to a checkup. I can walk you to the bus stop." I hadn't even touched my grandson. As the bus pulled away, I watched their figures fade, and I understood something that hurt more than the distance, more than the silence. I was not just being pushed aside, I was being erased. 2 weeks passed after my brief visit to Boston. I tried to settle back into my routine in Cleveland, but something inside me felt hollow. Every morning I checked my phone, hoping Caleb might send a picture of Oliver or even a short message. Nothing came. The silence grew heavy and familiar, like an old coat I didn't want to wear but couldn't take off. One afternoon, while I was washing dishes, the phone rang. I assumed it was Marjorie or a telemarketer. I answered without thinking. The voice on the line was calm and professional. "Hello, this is the billing department from Bayview Medical Center in Boston. We are calling regarding a balance that needs immediate attention." My heart tightened. I said, "I think you have the wrong number," but the woman continued, "The account lists you as the emergency financial contact for the delivery and related care. The outstanding amount is $9,800. I nearly dropped the phone. I stood frozen, staring at the kitchen window where a gust of winter wind rattled the glass. I whispered, "I'm sorry, but I don't understand." She replied, "Caleb Morrison provided your information for payment if needed." Something inside me cracked open. Not once, not at any stage of the pregnancy or birth, had he reached out for support, for love, for comfort. But when it came to money, when it came to responsibility, that's when I mattered. My voice steadied in a way that surprised even me. I said calmly, "I am not responsible for that bill. I don't have any family in Boston." There was a quiet pause on the other end of the call before the woman thanked me and ended the call. I set the phone down. My hands were trembling, but my mind was clear for the first time in years. It was the moment I understood that love without respect is not love, and I refused to be treated like a wallet with a heartbeat ever again. After the hospital call, I turned off the faucet and leaned against the counter until my heartbeat slowed. It felt as if someone had lifted a curtain and shown me the truth I had been refusing to see. I was not part of Caleb's life, not really. I was a backup plan, a safety net, someone he could reach for only when it suited him. That night, Caleb finally called. His voice was sharp, the way it gets when he feels cornered. "Mom, why did you tell the hospital you wouldn't cover the bill?" I asked him calmly, "Why did you put my name down without asking me?" He sighed heavily, as if I was the problem. "Because it was the easiest. You're his grandmother. Families help each other." I felt something shift inside me. I answered,
Families also talk. Families respect each other. You have done neither. There was a long silence on the line before he muttered, I cannot deal with this right now, and hung up. The next morning, I woke up to an email from him. It was cold and distant. He wrote that he was disappointed in me, that Sabrina was upset, that I had made things harder for them. He ended with a sentence that cut deeper than anything else. Maybe it is best if we take a break from communicating for a while. I reread his words more times than I want to admit. Then I sat down at the small wooden desk in my living room and replied with the clearest message I had written in years. I told him how it felt to be left out, dismissed, used. I told him I loved him, but I would no longer accept being treated like a resource instead of a mother. When I pressed send, the house felt quiet. But for once, the silence did not hurt. It felt necessary. 6 months passed without a single word from Caleb. At first, the silence felt like punishment. Then it felt like protection. I went on with my days, working part-time at the community center, gardening in the afternoons, walking with Marjorie on quiet evenings. Life was small but steady, and for the first time in a long while, I was not waiting by the phone. Then, one snowy morning in late February, my phone rang with the Boston area code. My stomach tightened. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something told me to answer. A gentle voice spoke. Hello, Mrs. Morrison. This is Caroline from the Boston Department of Family Services. I am calling about your grandson, Oliver. My breath caught. She continued carefully. There has been a situation regarding his care. We were told you might be the next of kin available to help. I sank into a chair, gripping the armrest. What happened? She explained that Sabrina had been struggling with severe postpartum depression that had gone untreated for too long. Caleb had recently lost his job, and the stress inside the home had escalated. A neighbor reported hearing loud arguments. When officers visited, they found the apartment in disarray, and Sabrina unresponsive from exhaustion. Caleb was overwhelmed and unable to manage the situation. Oliver had been placed in temporary emergency care. I listened in stunned silence as the pieces fell into place. The picture-perfect life they had built was collapsing, and beneath it were cracks that had been forming long before I ever realized. Caroline asked softly, Mrs. Morrison, would you be willing to come to Boston? We need someone stable, someone family, to take Oliver while his parents sort things out. For a moment, I stared at the wall of my little living room. Snow was falling outside, coating the street in white. My heart ached with old wounds, but something stronger rose above them. Yes, I said quietly, I will come. Not because they needed me, but because Oliver deserved better than the chaos he had been born into. I arrived in Boston the next afternoon carrying a small overnight bag and a heart full of nerves. A caseworker met me in the lobby of the Family Services building and led me down a quiet hallway. When she opened the door to a supervised visitation room, I saw Caleb sitting on a plastic chair, his elbows on his knees, his face buried in his hands. He looked up when he heard me enter. His eyes were red, tired, older than they should have been. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he stood, and the words tumbled out of him like he had been holding them back for years. Mom, I am so sorry. His voice cracked. I failed you. I failed Oliver. I failed everything. I did not rush to hug him. I let the silence settle, because for once, he needed to sit in it. Then I stepped closer and placed a hand on his shoulder. Caleb, tell me what happened. He broke apart in front of me. He told me about losing his job, how he had been too embarrassed to say anything, how Sabrina had stopped sleeping, stopped eating, barely spoke, how he tried to hold everything together while pretending things were fine. He admitted he was ashamed of how he had treated me, how he had let Sabrina dictate the distance, how he thought he was protecting his new family by keeping me on the outside. I listened without judgment, because sometimes the hardest truth to face is the one you created yourself. A few minutes later, the caseworker brought Oliver into the room. The moment he saw me, his little arms stretched out instinctively. I did not expect that. I took him gently, feeling his soft weight settle against my chest. His small hand tugged at my sweater, and for a moment, everything in the world felt still. Sabrina was not present. She was undergoing inpatient treatment, focusing on her recovery. Caleb told me she had asked to see me when she was stronger. She said she wanted to apologize, to explain, to try again.
The next few weeks were slow, careful, and fragile. I stayed in Boston caring for Oliver, while Caleb attended counseling and Sabrina worked with doctors. Our conversations grew softer, more honest. The walls between us did not disappear overnight, but each day a new crack formed, letting in just a little more light. Some families break forever. Ours found its way back. One apology, one tear, and one tiny heartbeat at a time. I returned to Cleveland months later with Oliver asleep in my arms and Caleb walking beside me, carrying the diaper bag like it was a second chance. Our family wasn't perfect. It might never be, but perfection had never been the goal. What we needed was something simpler: respect, honesty, a willingness to show up even when it was uncomfortable. Caleb called me every night after I left Boston, not because of obligation, but because he finally understood what I had been trying to give him all along: not money, not sacrifice, not endless forgiveness, but love with boundaries, love that does not erase itself to be useful. Sabrina wrote me a letter a month after her treatment ended. It was shaky and honest. She explained her fears, her upbringing, her belief that I would judge her the same way her own mother did. She apologized for the distance, for the coldness, for the moment she shut me out. I wrote back telling her that healing is not a straight line, and that I was willing to walk it with her if she was willing to. Today, Oliver is 3. He runs into my arms without hesitation. He calls me Grandma Linda with a smile that melts whatever sorrow I once carried. If you're listening to this and you know what it feels like to be pushed aside, remember this: love is not measured by how much you can endure. It's measured by how much truth you are willing to stand on. Set your boundaries, know your worth, and never apologize for demanding the respect you deserve. If this story touched you, leave a comment, share your thoughts, and subscribe for more stories that remind us we are never too old to reclaim our voice.